Welcome to Caleb's Corner, y'all. Caleb Cantu here, back at it again. So, first of all, thank you to everyone who has been watching, to everybody who's been excited for this episode. I can't thank y'all enough for keeping up with me, making sure that I'm still doing my content, and asking when the next episode is going to be. That makes me happy, and I'm happy that you guys are enjoying what I have to offer and are excited about it. So, that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into today's episode. Today's episode is about David Attenborough and a life on the planet. David Attenborough is the voice of planet Earth, of Blue Planet, of Africa, of pretty much anything having to do with nature related for the past 60 to 70 years. David Attenborough is 93 years old. He is the star of this film. It is a Netflix original film. It is his experience as a explorer, a navigator, as an adventurer, and as a researcher, and his witness statement of everything that he has seen and what he expects for this planet within the last 100 years and within the next 100 years. So that being said, I'm super excited to talk about it. It's a really good film. If you've seen anything about Blue Planet, Planet Earth, then you know that it's a majority nature shots. So it's incredibly beautiful. It displays the natural wildlife of our planet Earth and what inhabits it, as far as the ecological systems of almost all of the nation's wildlife. And this film really touches on David Attenborough's entire life and what has come of the world from when he actually went out and did everything for the first time, which I'm really excited to talk about. So, in the beginning, right, of David Attenborough's career, 1954, he gives us some statistics as far as the world's population, which is about 2.7 billion at that time. And like I said, this is 1954. The carbon in the atmosphere is about 310 points per mile. So it's not too bad, but that's definitely not good. And then as far as the wilderness of a total on the Earth, we have about 64% left. So that's 1954. That is almost 75 years ago, right? 3/4 of a century later. And I'm going to go ahead and get into why it's so important that he brings up these statistics, because at the beginning of his career, everything was like brand new, right? 1954, war had just ended, World War II had just ended. There was an atmosphere of hope. There was an atmosphere of positivity. There was an atmosphere of, I'm going to go out and explore the world because now I have the means to. I have the capability. I have the technology. David Attenborough was around like when aviation, airplanes, commercial air flights, all of those things were just taking off. I mean, can you imagine how big the world became once we had the ability to fly over oceans? It cut down travel time by 3 times. I mean, you can't even imagine the possibilities of everything that you could explore and discover in 1954. And I think about this constantly because you can't discover anything these days. I went to Colorado a few years ago on a spring break trip with one of my very good friends, and we were at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and there was so much beauty. I mean, it was fantastic to walk through that exhibit, every exhibit, the astrology department, right? The geology department, the animals. It was just incredible to see everything that they discovered, collected, and a lot of it was based from Colorado. It's crazy to think that 75 to 100 years ago, you could walk out in your backyard and discover something. Like, you could literally have discovered something that nobody else had ever seen before. And in today's world, with technology and the internet, you can't discover anything. Almost everything has been discovered. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't an endless possibility of life and that there isn't something that we have yet to discover. But as far as like things that an average everyday Joe just come across, there's not a lot of new things. And so David Attenborough set out on a quest in 1954 to figure out what was going on in the world and in the most remote parts of the world, and to document it and bring it back to civilization, so that way we could benefit from it and learn from it and experience it. And He has lived an incredible life. I think living the way that he did is the way that human beings were meant to. Now, of course, not everybody has the means, the resources to go out and travel the world and just experience things and watch things grow and look at life happening all around you, because it's not a sustainable way of life, but it is something to learn from. And I think it's incredible that he had the opportunity to do this. And not only is he sharing the knowledge and wisdom from his trips, but he's also trying to save humanity. And he's doing it in a way that is supported by evidence and facts. And it's also something that is recognizable, right? Throughout all time. You can see his work, you can see what he's talking about, and it's evident that not only is he telling the truth, but what he's doing is he's doing it in a way that's engaging. His voice is just meant to take you on a journey, and he narrates things so well that it almost feels like you're there and that you're experiencing wildlife and nature with him. And so I think he was perfect for the purpose that God had put in his life, to explore the world and to bring it back to us so that we could experience it. And like I said, at the peak, at the beginning of David Attenborough's career, population was 2.7 billion, right? The carbon emission in the air was 310 ppms, and the wilderness was about 64%. Let's fast forward about 20 years, okay? 1978, David's next time frame that he gives us as far as statistics and what he's doing in the world. He, in this adventure of David Attenborough, is talking to the gorillas, and the gorillas are an almost extinct species. Like, you don't see a bunch of natural tree gorillas in wildlife at that time. In fact, there was only 300 left, and it was because their children were so heavily valuable to poachers that poachers would come in and slaughter dozens of male and female adult gorillas just to get one child. And so that drastically decreased the population, which of course made rangers, wildlife protection, a necessity. So these gorillas were able to get used to humanity, get used to that human contact, and it allowed David Attenborough to go out and just enjoy life with them and kind of just experience them, document them, and research them in a way that nobody had ever been able to do before. And so it was incredible to watch. And the points that he brings up is that in that 20-year time span, the wilderness of the world had decreased by 10%. By 10%, the wilderness went from 64% to 55%, right? And that's in 20 years. So think about how big planet Earth is. And think about how much wilderness there is, how much we have not discovered, and how much you as a person would never be able to walk the entire Earth. Within 20 years, humanity killed 10%. 10% of the wilderness, increased the carbon emission by 25 parts per mile, which is ridiculous. And then there is now 4.3 billion people populating the Earth. So that being said, David is kind of explaining to us the fact that human involvement in nature is detrimental. It's detrimental because we've only ever been concerned with growth. We've only ever been concerned with population. We've never really been concerned with conservation, right? With making sure that the resources that we have are sustainable and are renewable. So that being said, we as human beings are just constantly absorbing and consuming. I mean, to be alive is to be consuming. You are breathing oxygen. You are consuming food for energy. You're drinking water. Your existence is just a product of consumption. And the more you consume, the more your existence continues. And what you consume has a direct effect on your life. If you're constantly eating hamburgers, if you're constantly eating junk food, if you only eat chips every single day, then what you're consuming is going to be detrimental to your health. But if you're eating right, if you're having a well-balanced diet of plant-based foods and some meat here and there, preferably wild game, then I promise you, like, your production, your level of output is going to be far greater than the person whose consumption is just rotten, is just getting by. And that is so evident in this film because David has spent his entire life researching and observing this beautiful planet. This man is 93 years old. He started doing that around 30 years old. So for the past 60 years, this man has gone out of his way to document and record what's going on this big, beautiful planet that we call Earth. And within that time frame, literally within a 60-year period, almost a little bit over half of a century, humanity has destroyed our planet. We've only ever been consumed with consumption. And there is at no point in which the human population as a whole has come together and said, we need to protect the resources and the elements that we have on our earth because it is unsustainable to be consistently growing and consuming and to not be replacing. I mean, from 1954, when David started his explorations, to today's current date, September, we're in October and it's 2020, the population of the wilderness has gone from 64% to 1954 to 35% in 2020. 35%, ladies and gentlemen. That is almost a 30% decrease in the population of the wilderness. That is so many animals, lives, ecosystems just being destroyed, just being completely obliterated from the face of the earth because we have this idea that the world is ours to till and it's ours to use until there's nothing left. Well, that should never be the case. That should never be the case because our world is not just our world, it's our children's world. And it's our children's children's world. So we need to make sure that everything that we are doing is not only a positive influence for ourselves, but it's setting up success for the generations to come. And David does a really good job of pointing that out because as someone who has lived through multiple generations, he's seen wars, he's seen the world go from populated to incredibly populated to having an abundant wilderness to literally having almost nothing. He predicts that within 100 years, you can expect the stability of the earth to disappear and the extinction of many, many biological creatures. It breaks my heart, y'all, because our earth is the only one we have. There's time travel and science fiction. There's going to a different planet. Elon Musk is trying to get us to colonize Mars, and all of this time and energy spent on alternate solutions could be spent on fixing what's already in front of us, right? Running from a problem doesn't make the problem go away. It just allows that problem to grow. And so if we were to come together as a species, as human beings, and stop the physical torment that we lay on this earth and on the soil that we till and on the oceans that we fish, then not only would we see a production and a positive benefit throughout all of wildlife, we would see it for ourselves. Food would become more sustainable, right? The wilderness would become more productive. I mean, half of the Amazon rainforest has been either cut down or burned. Like I said, guys, we were originally at 64% wilderness, and now we're at 35%. That is over half. That is over half of the world's wilderness gone, without a doubt. That is irreplicable. And I mean, how can you even fix that, right? Like, it seems to me that the ideology and attitude of today's generation is that it's not my problem, so I shouldn't fix it. And also, I won't be around to experience the problems, so why should I care? Guys, if every person alive cared just a little bit and did a small part of planting trees, recycling, picking up your trash, I promise you, the world would be so much better. because it wouldn't just be a select 100,000 few that are doing everything in their power to save reality as we know it and humanity and all of the ecosystems on the world. And while they're doing their best and striving towards the stars, it's still falling short because we're still having these issues. Imagine if 7.8 billion people came together and tried to make a difference. Not only would we fix the problems of this world, but we would set ourselves up for a lifetime and multiple lifetimes of success, happiness, and prosperity. A couple ways that David Attenborough presents these issues in a positive and a way to grow from this is through examples that have already been taking place in today's world. For example, fishing restrictions. There's a small Pacific island nation called Palau that regulates a majority of its fishing so that way the fish can repopulate that area, and the sailors who were going to fish in those areas are no longer allowed to. In fact, it's worked so well that within a short amount of time, not only were those endangered species so populated, that they were so populated they overfilled into the fishing areas. So now there's more fish in the fishing areas for this nation, and the natural biological order of the ocean is being restored as well. So that's a win-win, right? That's just one example of how if every nation could do something similar along these lines, we could not only restore our world, but we could grow from it as well. That's just one example. And I mean, another example is how in small parts of, I want to say, Africa, they are introducing grants to landowners that if you plant a native tree on your land, they will give you money. And I promise you, within 20 years of them doing this, they have dramatically increased the rainforest. I mean, by almost half of what was taken was replanted by these grants that landowners were given. And if every person alive did that, we could erase 2/3 of the carbon emission in the world, in the atmosphere, by just doing that. By just one person planting trees, every single person. So this film is a witness statement of David. And his witness statement is a story of global decline during a single lifetime. 93 years this man has been on this earth. 60 of those years he's been documenting and observing everything that we have going on in today's reality. And if someone who has explored countless adventures, countless realities, and seen more wildlife and nature than a person possibly can in a lifetime, and is urging you to save it, what does that tell you? Well, it should tell you that very few people care. And the people that do are willing to do anything to save it. If we each shared just a tiny bit of that compassion that we have for each other towards the world, we could save it. Because that's what being a human is, right? It's affecting change in this world. Every choice you make, every action you have has either a consequence or a reward. So are the actions and choices you're taking benefiting the people around you and the people coming after you? Because I promise you, if human beings continue to live the way that we are living today, there's not going to be a world left. He has this really good quote that I think sums up consumption in a nutshell. Unsustainable production accumulates damage, in which in enough time destroys entire ecosystems. And you may think that a couple fish going extinct or a couple bees going extinct won't affect you personally, but we live in a food chain. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And once the link is gone altogether, everything starts to collapse. Everything. It starts with something small and it works its way up to something big. So we as a species, as human beings, need to come together and try our best. Try our best to live our lives in a productive way. Try our best to be as sustainable as possible. And try our best to listen, respond, and react. And you know what, guys? Recycle. Wear your masks, right? Get out there. Just do your part. Be better. It's not that hard. It just takes a little bit of effort. And if we each put forth a little bit of effort, I promise you this world will be a better place. So that's really all I have to say on that. I truly appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you so much for listening. As always, this is Caleb's Corner. I'm Caleb Cantu, and I appreciate all of you. Thanks, guys.